So I kinda messed up. I did react to Vaati's previous video on the Lord of the Dragons. However, a lot of things happened and I ended up losing that file. To make a long story short, I used the incorrect encoding settings. I attempted to re-encode it. I used the wrong settings again, so I deleted the newly re-encoded file, but accidentally deleted the original file as well. I went to restore it in the recycling bin, and then turns out the recycling bin automatically emptied itself because it had reached full capacity, and no recovery software is able to find that original video. And I'm also not gonna sit here and pretend to not know what I know about that video. And even if I was to frame it as like a second watch through to potentially have like new theories or something new to add, I did. And when I watched the video back, I didn't really have anything new to say or anything of value to add, which is something that is really important to me to have in really any reaction video. Like, why have a reaction if you don't add something to it? So I apologize, but unfortunately, my reaction to the Lord of the Dragons is gone forever. And now I hate myself just a little bit more. But hopefully, this video actually does make it to YouTube, so... But anyways, as always, the link to the OG is at the top of the description. Please go and support Vaati for all the amazing work that he does.
Up until last week, we didn't know much about the DLC. In fact, we knew... But now we know that the DLC entrance is here, in Mohgwyn Palace, before Miquella's withered arm.
Okay, so yeah, this is the last video within the playlist, so it's very, very recent, and probably after the DLC got announced, which, speaking of, I have yet to even see the trailer for it or know anything about the story, which I know Vaati has videos on them as well.
I think it could be important to understand the circumstances of Miquella's death here at the hands of Mohg, so let's dive in.
Literally.
As the
I think I incorrectly talked about how the omens were like cursed by a primordial energy that used to exist long before the golden tree. Or well, no, not golden tree, the Erd tree. It wasn't really a curse, but it's more of a blessing. However, the people of the Golden Order kind of see it as a curse, right? Else, why would they throw Mohg and his brother down to the sewers and kind of forget about them?
The age of the Erd tree began. Mohg was born, of the union between Queen Marika and Lord Godfrey. Godfrey was the first Elden Lord, and as such, Mohg is one of the oldest demigods, alongside his siblings who were Morgott and Godwyn. Mohg and Morgott were twins, born together and born as Omen, placing them in stark contrast to their brother Godwyn, who was the golden child, so to speak. Omen, like Mohg and Morgott on the other hand, were considered to be cursed. But what are the Omen? Skip this chapter if you've heard it all before, but I think the Omen are born by chance, sprouting.
Well, it would certainly help to have a bit of a refresher here. It has been a while since we last talked about Mohg.
These grotesque horns that are vestiges of the primordial crucible. So what is the crucible? The crucible is a melting pot of life that existed before the Erd tree, and its energies are actually what became the Erd tree. It's here that there was this blending of many creatures' physiological aspects, like feathers, tail, knot, scale, fang, and horn. What's truly noteworthy about these aspects is that they would sometimes come to grow on creatures that weren't supposed to have them. For example, kill a deer or sheep, or even an ancestral follower in the lands between, and there's a tiny chance that you'll receive a budding horn, which I think are not unlike the horns of the Omen. The budding horn reads, "This horn began to sprout on a beast that typically bears no horn. Perhaps it is a vestige of the primordial crucible." According to the crucible talismans, there was a time when these aspects, like horns, were once considered signifiers of the divine. And that makes some sense because these aspects stem from the Crucible, which did become the Erd Tree, so why wouldn't they be considered holy? And so it's during this time that we have to assume that the ancient warriors known as the Crucible Knights were knighted, serving Lord Godfrey and fighting with many aspects of the Crucible, including horn, tail, breath, and even wing. But fast forward to the current age, and the Crucible Knights are lost, scattered all over the lands between, fighting for different causes or for no cause at all. And that's because Queen Marika's Golden Order abandoned them. The Crucible Gauntlets reveal that, in time, the strength shown by these knights, and even their appearance, came to be looked upon with scorn for having such close resemblance to chaos. This matches a wider trend in Marika's Golden Order, where things were moving away from chaos and the Crucible and even the Erd Tree, and towards fundamentalism instead, as the age of the Erd Tree progressed. But the Crucible Knights got off easy, all things considered. Take these creatures, for example. Previously, they were seen as divine for having aspects of the Crucible at birth, but eventually they came to be called misbegotten instead, a word that really sends the vibe that these were now seen as contemptible creatures.
I think there's even like some sort of cults or religion or particular weapon. It's come to my memory that it was used in order to ceremoniously cut off the horns from Omen. And if I remember correctly, most of them didn't survive that process.
Ill-gotten gains. The misbegotten became seen as impure, a fact revealed by the spirit ashes of perfumer Tricia, who was a healer who dedicated her efforts to treating misbegotten and the Omen as well. The Omen and the misbegotten certainly needed treatment.
And yeah, as you can see in that previous one, the horns were cut off. It's all red and... ugh, God, I feel so bad for them, but like, I could also say that for pretty much every character in this entire story.
Many of them suffered these grievous wounds as a result of their horns being cut off. Those responsible for these wounds in particular were the Omen Killers, a sect of Leyndell butchers who had full authority to hunt the Omen and amputate their horns. So, in my opinion, the tradition of cutting off Omen horns would have begun because horns are the offending part of the Omen, as they represent their link to the primordial crucible, which is something that became this accursed concept.
Did we ever get a reason as to why specifically it's horns? Because, I mean, there are other things like, you know, the feathers and the wings and stuff like that. But horns they're kind of everywhere, right? And they're the things that get cut off, so maybe it's just the preferred form? Or potentially there's some greater symbolism behind it. I wouldn't know.
And Omen do bear more aspects of the Crucible than just horns. Mohg has a set of wings, just like the Misbegotten, and Morgott might as well, though they're only really rigged in his animation files. Instead, Morgott has a tail, just like the Crucible Knights. All that said, the defining aspect of the Omen are definitely the horns. That, and their brute strength, were enough to label them as Omen, distinct from the Misbegotten, but still born by chance, though many Omen were apparently born directly from the Erd Tree's royal line. Two of the darkest items in the game are the Omen Bairn and the Regal Omen Bairn. The word bairn means child, and these items are dolls. They're fetishes that were fashioned to memorialize Omen children who are dead, or who might as well be. The Omen Bairn's description reads, "Omen babies have all their horns excised, causing most to perish, and those that survive live alongside those memorialized by the Regal Omen Bairn," which reads, "Omen babies born of royalty do not have their horns excised, but instead are kept underground, unbeknownst to anyone, imprisoned for eternity." So some concessions were made for
Is that any better?
As opposed to the Misbegotten. Two Omen children, Mohg and Morgott, were after all a part of the Golden lineage, so the royal omens weren't mutilated, as long as their horns were out of mind and out of sight. And speaking of sight, a horn seems to be responsible for Mohg literally being half blind, as it has grown relentlessly into his eye socket. Incidentally, there's a bit of a trend with blind characters in Elden Ring, and in other From Software games as well, and it's that those blinded are, ironically, able to see what sighted folk cannot.
I see. I still have to learn about the Dark Souls games, which I'll probably do once we figure out everything with Elden Ring. But from at least the art that I've seen of the game, I do believe the Fire Keepers, I think they're called, they all have this band wrapped around their eyes, which I think means that they're blind. Either that or there's some other purpose to it. We'll talk about it when we get there.
For example, in Elden Ring, it was the exiled prophets who accurately foresaw the flame of ruin burning down the Erd Tree, and it was the guilty, their eyes gouged by thorns, who glimpsed an outer god in the darkness. There are lots of examples, so I guess coincidentally or not, Mohg, half blind and wounded, eventually did come to stand before an outer god of his own as well, and he met her deep underground. This outer god was called the Formless Mother, and the Mother of Truth, a fitting choice for the Omen, whose true mother had abandoned him.
Dang.
We've talked about outer gods in other videos, but
Millennia,
long story short, they're these cosmic, Lovecraftian entities that are at once extremely powerful, but also strangely limited in how they can influence events in the lands between. Instead of getting involved directly, they will often commune through envoys or vessels, and in the case of the Formless Mother, her subject of communion, one of them at least, was Mohg. The Blood Boon incantation describes Mohg's meeting with this outer god. It reads, "The Mother of Truth craves wounds. When Mohg stood before her, deep underground, his accursed blood erupted with fire, and he was besotted with the defilement that he was born into." The text also describes...
One second. Well, English is now my first language, but I have no idea what besotted means. Strongly infatuated, intoxicated, drunk. Oh... The example on Google is this: he became besotted with his best friend's sister. Oh my. Well, since we're talking about Mohg here, I guess that's not too far off.
Describes what happens when you cast this incantation. You thrust your arm into the body of the Formless Mother, then scatter the blood flame to set the area ablaze. So, there's a lot to break down with this one description, but let's start with the fact that this outer god is at once both the Formless Mother and the Mother of Truth. So what exactly do these titles mean? Let's start with the Formless Mother, because I feel like that title is easier to rationalize. She is likely formless because liquid blood is her essence, and incidentally, the word formless is also used to describe the dragon communion seal in Elden Ring, which is also made of blood. But let's cast our net beyond Elden Ring, to Bloodborne, where an extremely relevant parallel to the Formless Mother exists in the character of Formless Elden, which is also an outer god of sorts. The Elden Carol rune states that blood is the essence of the formless Great One, Elden, and while I absolutely think that the universes of Bloodborne and Elden Ring are separate, I'm confident that From Software are reusing a concept from Bloodborne here in Elden Ring. So,
I mean, same devs, same concept, same idea, being used in many different ways. I don't know if any of this carries over to affect Armored Core's story as well. Probably not, but I feel like if you have the same guys working on it, then they're probably going to have similar ideas.
It is that I'm confident that blood is also the essence of the Formless Mother. That said, the Formless Mother still has a body of sorts. We thrust our arm cross-dimensionally into it when we cast Blood Boon, and when we rip our arm out, we scatter not just blood, but blood flame. Thus, while I think the Formless Mother absolutely has an affinity for any blood, I think her essence is, more accurately, blood flame. And she's not the only outer god with a flame of her own. The Fell god has Giant's Flame. Death has Black Flame and Ghost Flame. Frenzy has Frenzy Flame, and you could even theorize that the Greater Will has the golden fire that spews from the mouth of the Elden Beast and
the Elden Beast and Placidusax. I mean, fire is also a very, very big part of Dark Souls' story too as well, yeah? You literally have the Fire Keepers, and I think your entire goal is to reignite the flame, or... well, actually, the ending probably changes depending on whether or not you decide to do that. In this instance, however, it's kind of needed in order to, I guess, fix this situation of stagnation that this world has been led into, with the tree kind of reaching the end of its life, essentially. Because we do burn the tree at the end, right? And I guess depending on why you burn it, or what, maybe there's even an ending where you don't burn it. That changes the outcome of the story.
Placidusax. So, flame is commonly a sign of an outer god's essence, and I think the Formless Mother is no different, with a blood flame that continues to threaten rupture on those afflicted long after it touches their flesh. The Formless Mother's other title is the Mother of Truth, and this title is a lot harder to interpret.
Cool shot.
The Mother of Truth. What truth? The only character that we know of that the Mother of Truth has appeared before is Moog. So we're kind of forced to judge her character through his. And while I guess it's possible that the Mother of Truth venerates the absolute truth or a broader truth, the fact that she chooses to act through Moog is at least a little bit telling. We know that she bestows power upon accursed blood, and I think this preference for accursed blood might be a part of the truth that she represents. I think she might prefer to act through those who are unfairly cursed, like the Omen, like Moog. And I say unfairly cursed because that's kind of what curses are always in From Software games. Curses are always the domain of the gods, and they're always delivered pretty heavy-handedly. Take Dark Souls, for example, where Gwyn, a god, refused to relinquish his Age of Fire, opting instead to curse humanity with undeath, so that they might fuel his fire until the world turns to ash. Pretty over the top, right?
Bruh. Come on, man. So that's why you don't die. Well, for realsies in Dark Souls. I see. Makes sense. I mean, in Elden Ring, we also have that mechanic where it's tied into the lore, so you should assume that it would be in previous From Software games as well.
And Queen Marika is actually very similar to Gwyn in that she's a god who arrogantly thinks her order is perfect to the point where she'll do anything to try and preserve it. Her hubris is alluded to in the Mending Rune of Perfect Order description, which states that the current imperfection of the Golden Order, or instability of ideology, can be blamed upon the fickleness of the gods no better than men. And it's this same hubris that led to the scorn of the Crucible, and I think the curse upon the Omen as well. To make things even more unfair for the Omen, their curse appears to largely be one of perception, of hate. The Omen Bairn description conflates these two things and speaks from the perspective of an Omen child who pleads, "Please don't hate me or curse me, please." I also think this notion of curses being unfair is explored further in the Dung Eater's questline, where the Dung Eater goes around defiling others and spreading the Omen curse. He calls this defilement his cursed blessing, because if he defiles everyone, in the end, everyone will be cursed, and therefore no one will be cursed. Thus, in his ending, a sort of cursed justice is restored to the world. Elden Ring has this consistent theme where characters turn their curse into their strength, and I think the Dung Eater and Mohg are perfect examples of that. And this is just my theory, but I think the Mother of Truth might bestow power upon the accursed because the truth is that curses of the gods are unfairly given. There should be nothing wrong with being born with omen horns, right? It's just this genetic trait, a vestige.
I mean, yeah, before it used to be celebrated even. But then somebody came in and decided, yeah, no, you're weird. Get out of here. So I guess maybe where we're taking this is that truth is something that is decided rather than actual truth, which is why this outer god chose Mohg as the person that they commune with.
Of the primordial crucible that was once even considered divine. But thanks to the Golden Order, these creatures are now considered omens instead. So I'd like to argue that this unfairness is why the Mother of Truth bestows power upon accursed blood.
Yep,
but
exactly.
Of course, this is just my theory, and I welcome any challenges to it in the comments. I think
makes sense.
Challenging each other respectfully is how we can get a bit closer to the truth.
Respectfully. Expecting that from the internet is kind of difficult. But I think for the most part, in our Elden Ring comment sections, everybody has been quite civilized, so thank you for that.
Speaking of, I saw arguments ages ago that stated that the Formless Mother is responsible for the curse of the omen. But I'd like to challenge that idea. I'm not sure it can be correct. For one, it's stated that Mohg first stood before the Formless Mother underground, and he was only down here because he was already banished here for being omen, so he must have been omen before this meeting. What's more, when he did stand before her, it's stated that his accursed blood erupted with fire. Thus, his blood was already accursed when it erupted with fire. Finally, it says Mohg was besotted with the defilement that he was born into. Thus, he was born omen, like all of the other omen children, born to be shunned in a wretched mire underground. But I think there's a reason that people argue that the Formless Mother created the omen, and I think one of the arguments is that Morgott, Mohg's brother, also has blood flame attacks, just like his brother. So I think people reason that blood flame is therefore synonymous with having accursed blood and that all omen have it.
But does that mean that does every omen have it? Or is it just these two brothers? Did they somehow, share a little bit of their power with each other?
That's not true, because only Mohg and Morgott seem to have blood that was set ablaze. It's clear Mohg's was set ablaze in item descriptions, and it's clear Morgott weaponized his own flaming blood by recanting it, but no other omen fight with blood flame. So I reckon they both received this blood flame from the Formless Mother. I think the Formless Mother appeared before not just Mohg, but Morgott as well, even though that...
Well, I mean, both of them were down there, right? I don't know if they were kept together, but they are brothers, so makes sense to me.
That's never mentioned. Only difference was Mohg embraced this power and Morgott spurned it. Indeed, Morgott only uses blood flame against us in his boss fight as a last resort. Morgott's blood flame became a cursed sword that reads, Weapon of Shifting Hue, used by Morgott, the Omen King. The accursed blood that Morgott recanted and sealed away reformed into this blade. For him to have this, I think, proves that it wasn't just Mohg that was approached by the Formless Mother, it was Morgott as well. They were both underground, assumedly sealed in the same place, after all, so I think both of them had their accursed blood set aflame. I think the Mother of Truth, like so many other outer gods, attempted to influence a demigod, and I think they failed with Morgott, but succeeded with Mohg. In the end, both Mohg and Morgott weaponized their trauma. For Moog, we can look at the cursed blood pot, for example, which you throw at enemies to douse them in accursed blood, causing summoned spirits to assail them with a rabid fervor, a childhood memory of the Lord of Blood. It's basically saying that Moog remembers being attacked for his accursed blood as a child, and considering the blood specifically motivates spirits to attack, it might be referencing Moog's experience of being haunted by evil spirits. According to the Omen Smirk mask, evil spirits haunt the Omen in their nightmares. So with this cursed blood pot, now Moog could give others a similar experience. The Mother of Truth craves wounds. She desires bloodshed, swarm of flies, blood boon, blood flame. Everything to do with her is designed to let the blood flow. So the Mother of Truth's base desires are quite simple. But does she want more? Where do her goals end, and where do Moog's begin? Well, beyond specifically wanting to empower the accursed, and beyond craving bloodshed, the Mother of Truth doesn't seem to want much. Take Moog's sacred spear, for example. It's called an instrument of communion with an outer god, and all it seems to do is pierce the formless mother, coating the blade in her blood flame.
Is there any significance to the fact that it's kind of like a trident?
That's it. That's the communion. What's more, this sacred spear is a design that will come to symbolize his dynasty. Not the Formless Mother's dynasty, Moog's dynasty. The Formless Mother might enable this, but at the end of the day, she is behind Moog's dynasty, but she's not the face of it. So,
I mean, she's also the truth, right? So to me, it makes sense that she wouldn't really change things as they were. She just kind of is. And I guess the only reason she stepped in here was because the truth was being shifted. Somebody was getting a little too feisty and had some ideas that didn't actually speak to the truth.
The most you could say, I think, is that she has ambition, yes, but she's not interested in being this god that's worshipped. I think that's very fitting for an outer god, actually. Instead, it's Moog's ambition that we should talk about. And it's Moog's ambition that led him to leave the sewers long ago. Probably as soon as he could overpower the shackles that bound him here. This battle you have down here with Moog is actually with an Omen illusion, not unlike the fight that you have with Morgoth's illusion. Omen have this ability to conjure illusions.
I didn't realize that. The first time you fight Morgoth, it's an illusion of him, and he still kicks your ass. The first brick wall that new players run into. Gotcha. I also didn't know about this fight with Moog down here. I suppose it makes all too much sense given how significant this place was in a very incredibly horrible way.
We can sort of infer that from the soundtrack, which calls them Omen illusions. Morgoth uses his illusion to hinder the Tarnished. His is pretty easy to understand, but it's kind of hard to understand why Moog's illusion is down here in the sewers. Moog's true location is a bit of a mystery, so maybe he put the illusion here to throw trackers off the scent and sort of pretend that he was still in.
I don't know about that one. It feels like a kind of a shallow reasoning. Given our track record, it probably has more to do with hate. More negative emotions.
In the sewers? Or did he leave it here to prevent access to the frenzied flame? Because his brother Morgoth does something similar down here after all. This illusion of Moog might even be conjured up by Morgoth. Because I just noticed that it seems to erupt into golden particles when it's defeated.
Wait, like
Still,
Morgoth?
It's impossible to know for sure. Anyway, nearby you can find an Omen shackle. These shackles have lost most of their power now. And indeed, Moog has long escaped the sewers, and not even the All-Knowing knows where to find him. But he's here, somewhere underneath the land of Caelid, a so-called Lord of Blood who rules in the ruins of an ancient civilization, which he has decided will be the seat of his coming dynasty.
Thrice!
This place is drenched in blood, swarming with Mohg's servants, and the crumbling palace itself is awash with the formless mother's blood flame. But it was not always this way. The map of Mohgwyn Palace reads, "In the lightless depths lies the cave of an ancient civilization. It is here Mohg, the Lord of Blood, is building his palace, to be the seat of his coming dynasty, named Mohgwyn." So, this ancient civilization existed long before Mohg. What was this place?
Who was it?
This ancient dynasty isn't given a name, but everything here should look very familiar. The underground woodland evokes the one found
the
in
Eternal City.
Shifra. The statues depict the same bearded figure as the statues in Uld and Ul. These are the remains of an ancient dynasty that can be found all over the lands between, and Mohg has very intentionally started to build his dynasty on the remains
on top
of their
it.
own. Mohg calling his rule a dynasty is intentionally evocative of the ancient dynasty. We know about this ancient dynasty because of the oracle bubbles, which are the sorceries of the claymen who served as priests in the ancient dynasty. The description goes on to state, the claymen search for lost oracles within their bubbles. And there's a whole video to be had on this topic, so I won't go too deep into this for now, especially since their culture doesn't really seem relevant to Mohg at all. Because I don't think Mohg is intent on reviving the old dynasty or continuing it. Rather, item descriptions stress that his is a new dynasty, and if there's anything from the old dynasty that he does use, like the architectural remains of the palace, or even possibly the antiquated Latin that he speaks, I feel he might be trying to evoke the old dynasty because he might have envied how widespread the old dynasty was, and I think he wants his dynasty to have this air of legitimacy, something it sorely lacks at the moment. Mohg's new dynasty is very different from the old. The Swarm of Flies incantation sums it up well and reads, "The new palace of the Lord of Blood lies in a swamp of festering blood." These flies can be cast as a Blood Oath incantation, which are spells directly linked to Mohg's own power. But aside from the incantation, these flies also spawn from the blood-tainted excrement that you can loot in this area, which contain dense colonies of tiny eggs of unknown but assuredly revolting origin. The roped fly pot elaborates, stating, "The maggots found in waste feed on blood and turn into vicious flies that are pitiably short-lived. Their fangs inflict countless lacerations on the victim, while the grating sound of their wings assails their sanity. And specifically, these flies spawn from the excrement of carnivorous beasts, of which there are now many in the new dynasty, all festering with these bloody pustules and being even tougher than their kin on the surface. So, not a great place. And yet...
Yeah, right? I can't imagine anybody who's, like, scared of blood being able to go down here in any capacity. This whole cesspool of just disease. Maggots and, you're gonna build your civilization essentially on top of this? But I suppose if you make a pact with a god of blood, then yeah, this is kind of how it turns out.
Many disenfranchised beings still seem to choose to reside here, soaking in the festering blood swamp. Which brings us to the Albinaurics here. In a way, the Albinaurics themselves have accursed blood, not unlike the Omen. The Albinauric blood clot reads, "Albinaurics are life forms made by human hands. Thus many believe them to live impure lives, untouched by the Erd Tree's grace." Now, this is just my own speculation, but we know that the Formless Mother bestows power upon accursed blood. So do you think maybe it's fitting that Of all the creatures in this blood-soaked land, many of the Albinorics have found a way to weaponize the blood. I think they've accepted Mohg's tainted blood quite well. The red Albinorics stand apart from their silverkin, who sit dejectedly upon the cliff face. The red ones patrol the area and fight with attacks that are actually unique from every other Albinoric in the game. Even their model is a little bit unique, beyond just being red. Look at their heads and you'll see these tiny little omen horns.
I did not notice that. Is this a situation where, much like the dragons, they're kind of adapting to their environment and their body is changing because of it? But like, is this the Formless Mother's influence, or is this the Crucible's influence? Because the horns would go with that, right? Or maybe it's just straight up Mohg.
Sprouting. Personally, I believe this is because they've been soaking in blood. Specifically, I think they've been tainted by Mohg's omen blood. We know from the Seedbed Curse icon
Makes sense.
and the Dung Eater questline that it's possible to spread omen horns, or at least that horns are an aspect of a defilement that can be spread. So I think that explains why they're sprouting horns here. And there is also evidence that reveals Mohg was attempting to share his accursed blood with others. This leads us to Vare and the war surgeons who were abducted by Mohg, who wanted to see if they could tame the accursed blood.
Tame it? How would you go about doing that?
As you enter the Mohgwyn Palace grounds, 3 white-robed invaders assail you, one after the other. These are the nameless white masks, and they kind of have fascinating lore to speak of. The white masks wear the war surgeon gown, which marks them as war surgeons, who were effectively mercy killers. The dagger talisman elaborates, stating that the white-garbed field surgeon...
I'll be honest with you, I thought they were medics, but no. Mercy killers. Gotcha, of course.
Come to the aid of friend and foe alike by dealing a final deadly thrust to spare them from the prolonged agony of a mortal wound. So their name is a bit misleading, as there isn't really any surgery occurring here that could save someone's life. Their favorite weapon is the Miséricorde, a dagger with a name that translates to mercy, and it reads, "Dagger favored by military physicians in white. Medicine is mercy, and mercy upon the battlefield is ruthless." The White Mask's weapon is found in a storage quarter of Stormvale, and their talisman is found in Volcano Manor, so it's kind of difficult to say which faction they served, if any. After all, they delivered death equally to friend and foe, so they were probably a common sight on the battlefields of the Shattering, regardless of their allegiance. Their choice of white clothing is curious as well. In war, white is the color of truce, which is appropriate for these somewhat neutral characters, and incidentally I think white also shows bloodstains a lot more starkly, and maybe that's why the color was chosen as well. These characters definitely got their hands dirty as they delivered their mercy.
Totally. 100%.
But constantly delivering mercy would eventually cause them to turn depraved. The dagger talisman ends with the line, "A sense of mercy is a catalyst for bloodlust," and their weapon warns one to beware the killers, clothed as men of compassion.
You know, maybe it starts out like that, but seeing that much death delivered by your own hands, you can imagine what that would do to somebody. Like, I mean, nowadays we do it so casually in video games, right? But like, it's a video game. And well, obviously Elden Ring is also a video game, in case you guys didn't know. But from an in-universe perspective, taking that much life, that'll change a man. Any man.
So the war surgeons inevitably...
Is Vare the guy who tells you that you're maidenless? Where all the memes come from? I think so. Like, he's standing there on that, well, basically the first guy that you meet once you leave the tutorial area.
These...
Well, like, to become a member of his kingdom, essentially, right?
because instead of the phrase tame the Moog's noble blood.
Give me your finger. This noble blood will be an immutable badge of honor once it settles inside of you. Oh, good heavens. Clench your teeth or something.
Bruh.
The bloody finger item, which is your finger, I might add, reads, glistening blood has been siphoned into the nail of this finger. Its sickly pale skin feels nothing now, but the nail still aches with the sweetest pain.
Never forget that feeling of agony, for it is what binds you to Luminary Moog, to all of us.
And with a fresh infusion of this accursed, noble blood, you can invade other Tarnished and sate your bloodlust, materializing out of blood in other worlds, just like Moog does. But that's not the only way that you can invade with what is assumedly Moog's blood. You can also do so with a festering bloody finger. These are consumable items.
Is that an omen?
They're not your finger this time. And 3 of them are given to you by Vare, and he gives them to you as a test of sorts.
Oh, I have a gift for you, something fit only for the wise. A means for circumventing the draw of the 2 fingers. Give it a try, won't you?
Vare is hoping that you'll use these to fuel a bloodlust of your own, thereby distracting you from the allure of the 2 fingers, who have other plans for you as a Tarnished. And if you prove this bloodlust to Vare, you'll be inducted into their order, and you'll have blood infused into you, perhaps as he and other war surgeons once received.
I knew it from the very start. You have a taste for noble blood.
Literally blood for the blood god here. So that's why you draw your hand across your blade when you're trying to, I guess, ignite it with blood fire. And of course, they would mix in the multiplayer mechanic into the lore as well. It's just something that you don't really think about, right? Like, yeah, obviously it's a game. So, and the invasions happen in Dark Souls as well, so it's to be expected, but man, didn't realize it would all lead back to Moog here.
As opposed to the bloody finger you can receive, these consumable, festering bloody fingers are blackened with blood congestion. And if you look closely, what looked like omen horns appear to be writhing at the end, reinforcing the idea again that it's Moog's accursed blood that had been injected into these fingers before they were cut off. The description goes on to state that these festering fingers have been chopped off rather unceremoniously. The lack of ceremony indicates a measure of disappointment with the owner of these fingers, I think. And that's why I think these fingers once belonged to other inductees, surgeons, just like the nameless war surgeons who failed to accept the infusion of Moog's blood. Note this dialogue from Vare if you deny him.
You will die nameless, without ceremony.
So the nameless war surgeons are likely also those whose fingers were unceremoniously chopped off, it seems. They're a warning of what could happen to you if you listen to Vare's speech, which is enticing in its splendor, but full of deadly consequence. Despite this harsh treatment of his subjects, Moog is different to the 2 fingers, according to Vare, at least. And one of the key differences, apparently, is love. In his dialogue, Vare...
I didn't realize Vare's weapon was a bouquet. A very deadly one, might I add.
Vare laments that the 2 fingers have no love for the Tarnished, but Moog does, he says. Incidentally, the Tarnished are kind of related to Moog via Godfrey, in a way. We're all of the same bloodline, so I guess it is true that we are at least somewhat alike. Vare really is very loyal to Moog, and indeed, amongst all the war surgeons, Vare is actually the only one that's capable of incanting Blood Flame Blade, a spell that coats his weapon with what we know is the essence of the Formless Mother. Vare has been granted strength beyond any other character in Mohg's dynasty, it seems, and Vare is, no doubt, eventually very disappointed in you when you teleport to the palace early, before the new dynasty has even begun. This is what leads to an optional confrontation with Vare and his death.
Oh, luminary Mohg, please grant the strength you promised. I have given everything.
You can teleport to Mohgwyn Palace early with the Pure Blood Knight's Medal, which is something Vare gives you if you prove yourself to him.
I've gone out of my way to provide one to you, but you mustn't use it just yet. The meeting must wait until the Mohgwyn dynasty commences. Luminary Mohg yet slumbers beside the divinity.
Now that we've been inducted, we start to see Mohg's luminary vision and can learn how Mohgwyn dynasty is supposed to come about. The Lord of Blood's exaltation talisman explains, reading, "Render up your offerings of blood to your lord, drench my consort's chamber, slake his cocoon's thirst. His awakening shall herald the dawn of our dynasty."
I see. So literally, the beginning of your dynasty is when Miquella is revived. Although I don't think that's going to be happening anytime soon. Wait. Actually, scratch that. We do have the DLC coming up, so that could actually be happening, and Mohg's dynasty could become a thing and stuff like that.
So he's specifically saying that others should make offerings to Miquella. And I think the ones he's telling to make the offerings would be his bloody fingers. By invading and killing, I think we might just be making offerings of others. And I think also these offerings would be made by the sanguine nobles, who are just as aggressive as the bloody fingers are if you find them out in the open world. For example, this is one of many sanguine nobles, and you fight them here at the road.
That's freaking badass, man, just rising out of the blood like that. I would not want to mess with them. Also, what is that sword? That sword seems perfect for poking into somebody and creating a gushing hole of blood out of them.
Rose Church in Leonia. It's likely named after the blood rose, which is an item deeply related to all things bloody.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. The blood rose, and then that's linked to Vare's weapon being a bouquet of roses. Yeah, I see. I see you.
And the building itself is a sort of parish. It's a church that operates in a foreign land, and it's no coincidence that it's here that Vare attempts to recruit you. In fact, the enemy inside the church is supposedly a recruiter as well, although I kind of question their recruiting techniques.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Like, trying to get somebody invested into your cause, it would probably be best not to stab them. This just makes me think of, like, the toxic people in some fandoms who want to convince you that their fandom is really, really cool, and the first thing they do is insult your fandom and tell you that it's absolutely shit compared to mine. And, like, what? That's not how you convince somebody to take your side, by immediately attacking them. But, you know, people are gonna be people, so what can you do? I do run into these kind of folks a lot, though, in the comments, because, well, we do explore several different kinds of fandoms. It's just something that I just really enjoy doing. I think everything's cool in its own way, and there doesn't really need to be this tribalism, but whatever. We can just enjoy the things that we want to enjoy in the way that we enjoy them.
The sanguine noble hood is worn by nobles who serve the Lord of Blood and reads, "Known to strike from pools of blood, these assassins are missionaries, come to share the gospel of accursed blood." Just like the red albinorics, the sanguine nobles have started to grow omen horns, and their rank seems to exceed that of the albinorics, as can be inferred by the noble in Mohgwyn Palace, who stands before a crowd of albinorics. Again, rather than being true omen, I think this is another instance where being infused with Mohg's accursed blood has led to their horns growing, a cursed blessing, as the Dung Eater would say. Their robes go on to read, "The grand metallic pattern on the shoulder is a signifier of the noble rank they intend to claim upon the advent of the new dynasty they are working to install."
What is that pattern supposed to be of? Is it like a helix? Like a DNA strand? I don't know.
And their weapons are designed to rip the flesh with sickening efficacy, suggesting that they really are working to install this new dynasty via the blood loss of others, making offerings for Miquella's cocoon. And again, I think the Bloody Fingers are the same way. Ura calls the Bloody Fingers tarnished, held in thrall by cessblood, zealots who stalk their own.
If it isn't Nereus, the Bloody Finger, the end is nigh. For you.
Ura is familiar with many such Bloody Fingers, none more so than Eleonora, who is the one he loves.
Yeah.
And she's the one who he considers to be the deadliest Bloody Finger of all.
Didn't we learn about Eleonora in the dragon lore video? I think she was one of the ones who ate the heart of a dragon, yeah.
I'm dying to see you. Eleonora. Violet Bloody Finger.
In the end, though, Eleonora kills Ura here at the Second Church of Marika. And this church is interesting because despite being a Church of Marika, there's clearly been an attempt by Mohg's adherents to usurp it. Note the blood roses, the sanguine noble who appears here, the hound here festering with blood, and of course Eleonora herself. Eleonora is one of Mohg's Bloody Fingers, the most dangerous of them all, if Ura is to be believed.
There it is.
Perhaps it's for this reason that Mohg might have entrusted her with the Purifying Crystal Tear, an item that can nullify the effect of Mohg's Rite of Blood attack. Either that, or she has somehow procured this Purifying Crystal Tear because she has a secret plan to attack Mohg. You could definitely speculate in that direction as well, I think, if you wanted to. Eleonora wields a twinned naginata, a weapon that's forged in the land of Reeds,
really cool.
which is a place locked in civil war that has become alienated from the culture of its neighbors. Little wonder, it is said, that the entire nation has succumbed to blood-soaked madness. It's on this note that I'd again like to return to the description of...
So, I mean, clearly Japan, right? In this universe, maybe?
Formless Erden in Bloodborne. Specifically, the part that says both Erden and Erden's inadvertent worshippers surreptitiously seek the precious blood. Earlier, we established that Erden and the Formless Mother clearly have some overlap, and I speculate that this overlap could extend to Erden's inadvertent worshippers as well. Inadvertent means unintentional or accidental worship in this context, and I think that the Formless Mother might have many, many children, because I think you can make a good case for her having many inadvertent worshippers of her own. After all, the blood-soaked madness of the land of Reeds has led more than one of their number directly to Mohg. Introducing Okina, who is a demon of a swordsman. His bloodlust led him into combat with Mohg himself, and his sword tells of this story, stating, when Mohg...
I mean, the blade is very similar to the blade we saw Eleonora wielding, or the naginata, I suppose.
The Lord of Blood, first felt Okina's sword and madness upon his flesh, he had a proposal to offer Okina the life of a demon, whose thirst would never go unsated. So it was that Okina became a bloody finger of Mohg, cutting down his enemies with rivers of blood, a cursed sword which has felled countless men.
Inadvertent
Weapons like these are really powerful when paired with the Lord of Blood's Exaltation talisman, which gives you an attack boost if blood loss is triggered in the vicinity. And one amazing little lore detail is that this Captain of Godric actually gets the attack power buff whenever there's blood loss nearby. hinting that he's actually carrying the Lord of Blood's exaltation talisman, and that he is thus an adherent of Mohg. The weapon art he uses, Bloody Slash, also suggests as much, as it is a blood oath skill granted by the Lord of Blood. So it seems this...
I was talking about this with Kiwi during the Maxwell reaction, but it's just really, really cool how these animations, these skills and whatnot can literally tell you who that they learned their skills from and where they come from and all their history, just from the way that they battle, which I think it's a... What's the word here? Poetic? It's kind of like when you read a book and then you see two warriors are clashing with each other and somehow they come to an understanding from, fighting and the clashing of their blades. That was always kind of a difficult concept for me to understand, but it is extremely apparent here because, well, you're the player character clashing your blades against the enemies and you understand them and who they are from the way they fight. They've done a really, really good job at being able to convey so much without, just exposition dump onto you through like the main gameplay loop, which is obviously, the Dark Souls combat.
Stormveil Captain has either defected or is secretly loyal to Mohg, or he has a dual allegiance. I love that it's left open to your interpretation. The talisman itself is dropped by Esgar, a priest of blood found in the catacombs below Leyndell, the same place where Mohg first met the Mother of Truth. He wears the robes of an adherent of Mohg, except for his great hood, which reads, a burial shroud of sorts, for those who discover, at long last, the truth they sought. I think this could be hinting that Esgar found the Mother of Truth here below, but it's hard to say for sure. Speaking of which, it's unclear if Mohg has ever shared the fact that he communes with the formless mother at all.
Oh, really? Does that mean everybody just believes it's Mohg's power? Also, you guys know I'm a complete outsider to this. I still have yet to play the game. But I have seen in comment sections and stuff of like some really, I guess, weird elitist or whatever making fun of people who play the game with like any of the cursed blood weapons because they're like super duper OP or something like that. I think I've seen comments like that before, but like, I don't know, it's a part of the game. It's a weapon in the game that you can obtain, so why wouldn't you use it if it's a good weapon that you enjoy using? Going around saying that people who beat this boss because they used a certain weapon or a particular skill in the game means that they didn't actually play the game is kind of silly to me, but whatever. I'm not a part of that community, so maybe my comments are ignorant, but that's just my perspective on it.
Most worship of her appears to be really indirect, and bloodshed for the sake of bloodshed seems reason enough for her and those that perform it as well. Perhaps it's for this reason that the All-Knowing casts doubt on Mohg's title, calling him the so-called Lord of Blood.
Oh, so that's where the so-called Lord of Blood was hiding himself, eh?
Perhaps this lack of clarity about Mohg's rule...
So that's his voice. I'm pretty sure in Maxwell's videos, Seth was the one voicing him, yeah. So that's what I was expecting.
Is why even item descriptions cast doubt on Mohg, who is the reigning lord and hierarch of the coming dynasty of Mohgwyn.
A raving lunatic.
A raving lunatic. After all, can blood offerings really lead to the awakening of Miquella? The remembrance of the Blood Lord does state that no matter how much of his bloody bedchamber he tried to share, he received no response from the young Imperium. But Mohg needs Miquella to awaken, because Mohg doesn't just want to be a ruler, he wants legitimacy in the eyes of the world. And since Miquella is an Empyrean eligible to be the god of this world, he could give Mohgwyn a legitimacy that might match even the Golden Order, which is structured in a similar way. It has a lord and a god at the forefront. So,
is it purely just for the position, or is there evidence suggesting that Mohg actually is in love with Miquella? Because I mean, I guess I can kind of see it in a way with like how Mikola was with this promotion, I guess, of abundance, of accepting, and I mean the Halig tree being a sanctuary for even the Omen as well. Basically anybody who couldn't fit in elsewhere would be able to fit into the Halig tree. That kindness is a very rare quality that we don't see too often here in the lore of Elden Ring. And I suppose, you know, Melania would also kind of fit the bill, but like, Melania's Melania. You're probably not going to be kidnapping Melania anytime soon. So maybe there's this aspect of, you know, Mikola was just the most vulnerable one because of his curse of eternal youth and the fact that he was also cocooned. Or actually, wait, was there any evidence suggesting that Mikola put Moog up to this? Is this all according to Keikaku on Mikola's side of things, where he's actually going to be reborn in a adult body, or like a body that isn't affected by any outer god? Because if it was Mikola's plan, then I don't think Melania knows about it, and Moog probably maybe doesn't know about it either. But then again, this is also viewing Mikola in kind of a more negative light, like a more conniving kind of way. Manipulative. Ugh. Why is this such a hard word to say? Which might not even be Mikola's character at all. Maybe Mikola's just a good boy. A good boy trying to save his twin sister and to put rights to wrongs. Also, like, revive his dead older brother whose body is rotting and causing a lot of problems for everybody. We can't forget about that part, but also, like, the symbol on the flags in front of that place is also of an eclipse. And for any Berserk readers out there, the eclipse doesn't really suggest anything good. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I don't know. All of my ramblings here is probably something that we can get into when we get to the DLC stuff, or any theories that people have about it. So yeah, I think I'm just going to leave it here. But it is very interesting to think about.
It's time to finally talk about Mikola. For if he does awaken, then it's very likely that this will lead to the coming dynasty named Mohgwyn, and whatever nightmares that may bring.
Whatever nightmares. Oh boy.
Quinque!
Whatever nightmares that may bring is an extremely ominous line, especially considering Mikola has a dreaming alter ego. So to explain that quickly, like many other characters in the game, Mikola has a duality to his character. On one hand, you have Mikola, the unalloyed, who helped his sister resist the effects of the Scarlet Rot, who grew a home for the low and the meek, and who is cursed with eternal youth. But then, on the other hand, Mikola is also Saint Trina, a mysterious character that has powers relating to sleep and dreams. The symbol of their faith is this, Trina's lily, which dulls the senses, preventing agitation. And it's no coincidence that this lily is shaped just like Mikola's lily, for the nascent Mikola is Saint Trina, or they're moonlighting as them in their dreams, so to speak. And whatever Saint Trina has been doing, it's made a really good impression on a great many people. The Lands Between is a pretty harrowing place, after all, and to get relief, it seems, some people have turned to Saint Trina, whose lilies help them get away from it all. Priests of Saint Trina also exist, crafting sleep arrows to spread their teachings. The sweet oblivion of sleep can become quite the habit. Another such item is the sleep pot, which says, like a lullaby or a quagmire, its light purple haze irresistibly draws its victims down into sleep. Sweet dreams.
I know quite a few people, I mean, even people in our group like Serbia and Kiwi, who would love to have some of this. The cure to insomnia, I'm sure, would attract a bunch of people to become believers.
Incidentally, the word lullaby brings to mind another piece of cut content to do with Mikola, where the red-eyed merchants were once taught the song that they play in their tomb by a mysterious figure. And fittingly, Saint Trina's full cut name is Saint Trina of the Cradle Song, which connects them to the merchant's song. In cut merchant dialogue, it's stated that the one who sang for them now sings no longer. The singer is missing, just like Saint Trina, because the one who sang was Saint Trina. And we don't really have to just rely on cut content to tell us of that fact. An item called Favor's Cookbook suggests that Saint Trina is missing as well, as it is a record of crafting techniques left by a man who was utterly captivated by Saint Trina. He continued the search for her in his slumber. So he was searching for her because Saint Trina went missing. Also, Saint Trina's sword reads, Saint Trina is an enigmatic figure. Some say she is a comely young girl. Others are sure he is a boy.
There it is.
The only certainty is that their appearance was as sudden as their disappearance. So Saint Trina went missing. And returning to cut dialogue, we also learn about a character called Rico, a cut NPC who claims to be Miquella's humble servant, and who we believe finds Miquella's body at Mohg's palace. Here, Rico states, "Finally, I have found it. Saint Trina, no, Lord Miquella's cadaver. I have partaken of untold secrets, such that I may aid you, O Lord. So please, I hope you welcome your humble servant, Rico, into your dream, the world of your heart." So, Rico believed that he was finally going to be able to aid Miquella and enter his dream, now that he'd found him in the physical world. Before the DLC trailer was revealed, I would have said, yeah, I reckon the DLC will take us to Miquella's dream world. It sounds like the perfect place for DLC, right? But now, with the recent trailer, it can't be that simple, because the interviews featured in my DLC video make it quite clear that Miquella's cadaver will instead take us to the Land of Shadow, a place that was once physically a part of the Lands Between before it was veiled and obscured by Queen Marika.
Interesting, the Land of Shadow, because that is most certainly not the Erd Tree. There also seems to be some, like, fabric or something coming off the top of it. This is probably footage from the trailer already. Yeah, I don't think we've ever talked about this, have we? In any of the lore videos anyways.
In that video, we speculated that the Land of Shadow might be a place where the dead go. We speculated that it might be a kind of afterlife, or at least it might have once been a sort of afterlife before the Erd Tree sort of took over that role.
Okay. Well, honestly, with all of this footage, I should definitely check out that video. Although, I suppose maybe first, before we do that, I should just check out the Elden Ring DLC trailer. Because by now, at this point, I probably have a good enough grasp to maybe make some guesses of what's going on myself. And then we can jump into the video from Vaati. That or the Prepare to Cry series.
Reason this because Miquella is said to have divested himself of his flesh to get there. The poem reads, "It was to this land that Miquella departed, divesting himself of his flesh, his strength, his lineage, of all things golden." Of course, we don't yet know the true nature of the Land of Shadow, but it is kind of fitting for Saint Trina, of all people, to have died to arrive in this place, because death in Elden Ring has long been linked to sleep. For example, when Roger succumbs to Deathroot, he says this,
"Lately, I feel I'm on the precipice of falling into a deep, fathomless slumber, and I have an inkling it could spell trouble for you somehow."
Roger is almost hinting that he might be a threat in some realm beyond sleep.
Oh boy. I mean, death being associated with like a deep, deep slumber's kind of always been a thing, hasn't it? So in a way, you could view it as the same thing, the dream world as well as the world where souls go when they die. But also from the way that Vaati's framing this, I'm suspecting that obviously, they didn't show any footage of Saint Trina or anything like that, because there's still a lot that we don't know from the footage that we saw there.
And he's kind of right, because later we do find Roger, or a part of his vitality at least, which has been weaponized by fear. We do this inside of Godwin's deathbed dream, a phrase that obviously has sleep connotations as well. So I wonder, with death being so linked to sleep, could Mikola have planned this death in his own slumber so that he could travel to the land of shadow? One piece of evidence for Mikola's death being a sort of deep sleep could be the slumbering egg, which is an owl egg that will never hatch, prized as a symbol of the most sublime slumber. The egg is this powerful parallel to the situation with Mikola's cocoon. Mikola's cocoon was taken by Mohg before it was ready to hatch. Just so, this egg is looted from killing an owl, and thus is also taken before it was ready to hatch, perhaps before it was even ready to be born. The owl inside will never hatch, it's essentially dead, and this egg's description reminds us that this state of death is the most sublime slumber there is. So I conclude that there's a strong parallel between the slumbering egg and Mikola's cocoon. Touching the arm that extends out of the cocoon will bring us to the land of shadow, where Mikola traveled, long before us. As per the IGN interview, Miyazaki states that players will be following in Mikola's footsteps in the same way that they followed the blessings of the Sites of Grace in the lands between. And of course the player is not the only one who is curious about Mikola. There are several other characters in the world and NPCs who have been following Mikola as well, and the player will encounter them on their journey in the land of shadow, and they will make new friends and enemies, we hope. Fittingly, Mikola does have many followers, so does Saint Trina, and while no one seems to know for sure where they disappeared to, it is rumored. Gideon's dialogue reveals that he suspected Mikola was with the Lord of Blood, and there's even a phantom in the consecrated snowfield who points towards Mohgwyn Palace's waygate, and they died knowing exactly who took Mikola as well.
There are people that know,
and then of course there's Rico, that cut content character who senses their master needs their aid. Indeed, Saint Trina and Mikola seem to live on, beyond the death of their flesh. And while the land of shadow might not literally be the dream world that many expected it to be, there is evidence that Saint Trina's presence has been felt here. For example, this is Saint Trina's lily in the base game. It looks a bit sad, right? It only has a tiny hint of purple left. So this is why I wonder, could this lily in the background be a true lily of Saint Trina? It does appear to be more whole, and it appears in a sort of quagmire of sleep here. There's that signature purple sleep hue, and there's a masked character who is slumbering in this place. Incidentally, another thing I missed was that you can actually spy some lilies in the background of this fight as well. So perhaps this boss is linked to Saint Trina? But I digress.
Maybe there's some dark places
are becoming clearer to us. But that still leaves Mohg. First up, how did Mohg manage to abduct Mikola? Well, earlier we talked about how Mohg abducted the war surgeons, presumably to test the accursed blood on them. So already Mohg has a bit of a history of abduction. And if he can materialize from blood anywhere, like this cutscene suggests, and like his sanguine nobles and bloody fingers seem able to do, well, that would certainly explain how abducting Mikola was relatively easy for him, especially if Malenia was away fighting Radahn at the time. So during Mikola's abduction, he was ripped out of the tree. There's clearly a large gap here in the tree-like woman's form, almost as if this figure was pregnant with Mikola. And indeed, Mikola sits atop a giant pelvis bone in Mohg's palace, showing just how wholesale he was ripped from the Halig tree itself. The Mother of Truth desires a wound, indeed. So we know what happened, but why? Why did Mohg think abducting Mikola was a good idea?
Sex.
Did he just say what I thought he said? Why Why did Moog think abducting Mikola was a good idea? Sex? That's a good edit. I don't know if that was intentional, but... Oh man, that got me good. We were like super serious lore video up until that point.
Gonna get demonetized for that one.
Oh yeah, it was intentional! Vaati's a freaking genius, dude. That was great. That was incredible.
Moog believed Mikola could have transitioned from Empyrean to God. Maybe even Mikola believed that he could. And
yeah.
I think Moog wanted to take advantage of this process, and take advantage of the new god that would soon rise. The remembrance of the Blood Lord reads, wishing to raise Mikola to full godhood, Moog wished to become his consort, taking the role of monarch. But no matter how much of his bloody bedchamber he tried to share, he received no response from the young Empyrean. The wording of bedchamber is appropriate considering Moog is trying to consort with Mikola and become his lord, so to speak, and it being a bloody bedchamber is appropriate too, as items state that Moog slumbers beside the divinity, and the cutscene seems to be suggesting that Moog slumbers inside of Mikola's blood. Also, it's very fitting that they use the word slumber here.
Dearest Mikola,
Slumber, yeah.
you must abide alone a while.
So if Moog becomes his consort, then Moog will become a lord of sorts, not unlike the dynamic with the Elden Lord that has existed throughout history, where they become consort to their god. But the real question that remains is, how exactly does Mikola become a god in this situation? Considering Mikola's positioning in the womb of this giant tree-like woman, it's easy to assume that what he was attempting was a sort of rebirth here. And this brings me back to Rico's dialogue, the final part, where he says, "Indeed, I beg you grant my wish.
From Empyrean
that when you
to
transcend
God.
from Empyrean to God, allow me a place by your side." I wonder, what if the cocoon was part of this transition? It reminds me a lot of Berserk, which Miyazaki is endlessly inspired by, and spoiler alert if you haven't yet seen it.
It's a good series to be inspired by, that's for sure. Berserk is incredible, and I'm sure everybody watching this has already read it, because it's just that good.
But a certain character here also achieves a similar transition inside an egg, turning from human to a god of sorts. To become a part of the God Hand in this moment and achieve his dream, Griffith has to make a sacrifice, and in the end, he chooses to betray his companions, branding them and sealing their fate.
Blood everywhere. Just kind of like Moog's place, yeah? Mikola might be taking advantage of that in order to achieve this rebirth. And if not, then Moog certainly is trying to make Mikola into that. But man, these chapters were horrible to read. And one of the worst things that I've ever seen on Twitter was this fan art between Guts and Genderbent Griffith as a couple. I cannot forget about it. I hate it so much. Like there's this building of emotion deep within of disgust from seeing that. Oh god.
In my Mikola video, we draw a few parallels between Mikola and Griffith, and if Mikola is inspired by Griffith as much as I think, then that could be quite concerning, as there is a part of Melania's storyline as well.
Especially with the phrase earlier about if, you know, he's reborn and the nightmares this will unleash. Oh, goodness.
That also seems to be setting up some betrayal to come, although that is, of course, just speculation. This is probably a good time to talk about the fact that Mikola does have some very ominous overtones to their character. For starters, Saint Trina has an adult form, and it's a one-eyed creature with this spooky mass of elevated hair that is carved upon St. Trina's torch. What's more, remember, St. Trina's sleep fog draws others down into sleep against their will. Sleep is a weapon. St. Trina's sword makes that even more clear, as does cut content, which states, "The saint of the cradle song has become the very symbol of lost repose, and the feeble of heart were powerless to resist her kindness, even upon the battlefield."
Unable to resist.
In cut content, at least, the saint of the cradle song actually fought in certain wars with kindness. So that description mentions St. Trina's weaponized kindness and
fought in wars with kindness. Kind of like how Miquella's kindness could potentially be used in the, I guess, manipulative way. But like, still, I don't know. I don't know if that kindness is genuine or if it's for some greater goal, which actually makes it even more scary. Like, at least you can deal with somebody who's straight up, evil, but you don't know if the kind person who's being kind to you is actually evil or not. Well, evil is a very strong word to use here, and it's very definitive, which it probably isn't. There's definitely going to be a lot of more nuance here to decipher. But I've been told time and time again that I shouldn't take like every single thing that Vaati says as like the actual lore, because a lot of this has to do with theory crafting. There isn't really a source where you can straight up confirm this. There's only the evidence that we can find from within the game or like from cut content, which may or may not be a good reflection of how the game currently is. I guess all we can do is wait and see how it goes down.
And so does this line from the trailer.
Pure and radiant, he wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men.
Oh, well, there you go.
There is nothing more terrifying.
Malenia,
yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying.
Miquella, the most fearsome Empyrean of all. And lastly, the common soldiers of the Halig Tree discovered a bitter truth as they awaited their lord's return to the Halig Tree. They discovered that Miquella's sacred light would trigger them to self-destruct in their final moments.
Lovely.
But even so, they remained loyal, and I quote, "May the flash of our deaths guide Miquella's return."
Okay, now there is a lot of evidence here. It's kind of piling up and suggesting that Miquella is not the greatest person ever. But like, I don't know. Are we like doing some sort of confirmation bias here? Or maybe that's even funny for me to suggest because people are literally exploding. Yeah.
So in conclusion, it's for these reasons that I'm a bit concerned about this scary, dreaming demigod.
Yeah,
and
I'd be
about
concerned
the nightmares that might be incurred by Mohg's ritual with him inside the cocoon. A part of me wonders if the formless mother was supposed to be a part of Miquella's ascension to God, considering the ritual happening in Mohgwyn Palace. That would fit because a few gods we see in Elden Ring do have an outer god as a patron of sorts. Malenia has the outer god of rot, and she is destined to become the goddess of rot. Marika becomes a vessel for the Elden Ring, and she is the god of the greater will, who is almost certainly an outer god as well. So all of that sort of answers how Miquella might become a god, as best we can, considering how abstract the game is with these terms. My next question is, though, did Miquella foresee any of this happening? The Bewitching Branch is an item that can pierce a foe and turn them into a temporary ally, and it reads, "The Empyrean Miquella is loved by many people. Indeed, he has learned very well how to compel such affection."
Yeah, we learned about this a very long time ago from the video that we touched upon Miquella's lore and the Halig Tree and stuff like that, which was also, I believe, initially where we got introduced to the idea of Miquella being more scary than was suggested.
The wording here is kind of sinister, right? The fact that Miquella is capable of consciously compelling affection in order to get what he wants is very manipulative. And if Miquella is capable of masterminding others' affections, who's to say he hasn't done the same with Mohg? Mohg's infatuation with Miquella is very obvious and very cursed, considering Miquella's eternal youth and the fact that Miquella is technically Moog's half-brother. Again, I'm reminded of this scene with Griffith from Berserk, where Griffith spends a night with a powerful, perverted older man for money, which he needs to achieve his own goals. The man, Genon, is obsessed with Griffith. But to Griffith, Genon is nothing more than a stone lying on the side of the path he walks, and Griffith eventually discards him as such. In my Miquella video, we talked about just how much overlap there is between the characters of Miquella and Griffith, and so I just can't shake the feeling that Miquella might...
And then we have the shot too. There is a lot of ties that could potentially be here, that's for sure, and a lot of good evidence suggesting that, especially with the fact that we've referenced Dark Souls, oh, no, not Dark Souls, Berserk, a lot in all of the works that Miyazaki has done, so... And I mean, Griffith's a fantastic character. I mean, I hate his guts, no pun intended, but being able to draw that strong of an emotion from any reader it's a good villain. Heck yeah, I'd use that as inspiration for one of my characters if I were to ever create something like this.
To be using Moog here. But if that's true, why? What would Miquella stand to gain from masterminding this entire situation where he ends up dead and defiled? Before the DLC trailer dropped, I had imagined that Miquella's arm would take us into Miquella's dream world, and so I thought that Miquella might stand to benefit or suffer thanks to Moog's actions upon his slumbering form. I thought he might have even been co-opting the formless mother for his ascension into a god. But now, from what we understand about the DLC trailer, the Land of Shadow is a place distinct from Miquella, so the answer becomes different. We know Miquella divested himself of his flesh and grace to get here, so it's harder to imagine that the bloody rituals happening in Mohgwyn are having any effect on Miquella's self. Moog really might not be getting any response from Miquella for good reason. So I'm going to present one new theory on why Miquella might benefit from being here, based on the information we have from the DLC trailer, and it's this. So, we know Miquella divested himself of his flesh before reaching the Land of Shadow, right? And we know that he also divested himself of his grace to get here. He divested himself of his lineage, of all things golden. Divesting yourself of your flesh is hard enough, but divesting yourself of your grace is also difficult. Rani has difficulty with this in her questline. She divests herself of her flesh finally, but even then she's still linked to the two fingers and has to kill them to be freed completely. So what if Moog was instrumental not just to the process of Miquella dying, but the process of Miquella losing his grace as well? What if, by being doused in accursed blood, Miquella was defiled to the point that grace left him fully? We know that those doused in Moog's accursed blood start to grow omen horns.
To get rid of that.
The omen are graceless, and we know that being defiled is something that many people in the lands between fear. The Dung Eater is proof of that. We talked earlier about how they defile people, and how those people are terrified of what this means for them and their rebirth. So it is that I think that Miquella might have wanted to die in this manner, to fall into this state of sublime slumber, and also to be defiled to the point where grace leaves him. But that's just a theory, and of course, we don't have all of the pieces of the story yet, and I think it's impossible to say for sure which direction his story will go. I think this state of speculation is very much exactly where From Software wants us to be at this point.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Even the All-Knowing doesn't know what's going on here.
So Miquella was with the Lord of Blood after all. That is some fine intelligence indeed. Well, I wonder what comes next. If he continues his slumber within the cocoon, all would be well. But perhaps it would be safer to destroy it.
Perhaps.
Miquella is the one thing that remains a mystery to me.
So, what do you think?
Even Miquella's a mystery to some guy who knows everything? Oh no. Oh god. Well, this is certainly a predicament, isn't it? But this is getting me so hyped to actually like see the trailer for myself. Learn about the theories that people have been making about the DLC too. Yeah, we definitely got to get into that after this.
Did Miquella anticipate being taken from the Halig tree? Will he be affected by the Lord of Blood's machinations? Mohg certainly believes so. In fact, Mohg believes this even beyond the very moment of his death.
I can see it as clear as day. The coming of our dynasty. More
then Miquella will be reborn.
Before I go, let me be announcing a new...
I mean, even Final Fantasy had to move back their expansion because Elden Ring's coming out, so... Yeah, I get it. I mean, especially for a smaller game like this, you don't want to be releasing around that time. Everybody's going to be playing that. That was a good point to jump into the DLC trailer. After watching this video, I am so incredibly curious, I just want to watch it right now. But, you know, just in case I need some more background or maybe there's a particular order that is better here, I guess I'll leave it up to you guys who are more knowledgeable about it. But regardless, I'm really excited to make up some theories on my own from what I know. And listen to a bunch of other theories as well about that. Because, yeah, this is going in a direction that we kind of saw, but also very differently from what is normally expected. And the fact that this could potentially be based off of Griffith's whole story could lead to some incredible writing here that I very much want to be a part of. As in, you know, experience it along with you guys. So yeah, let me know. But if you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one.